brought to you by chemtrails, doing nothing to control the population or anything else for over 80 years. Good afternoon. I am parked up here in northern Tooele County. It's a very clear afternoon, and I thought I would do my observation over the Great Salt Lake here in the wintertime, where we've got fairly warm lake water and fairly cool air above it, and there's a little bit of interesting refraction going on. I'm up here at the following location, GPS-wise. 40, 38, 39, 112, 16, 30, and I'm currently sitting at about 45, 90. It varies up and down a little bit, 4,600 feet. And the key landmark to note is this small radio repeater tower here. If we look to the northwest, you've got Stansbury Island outlined darkly there. If we zoom in a little, the small dark point there is called Lambourne Rock, and behind them in the far distance are the Raft River Mountains, which are 90 miles away from my current location, and they're quite clear today. Actually, there's a lot of detail visible today. I don't have my tripod with me, unfortunately, but I wasn't really expecting it to be this clear. And if we pan across further here across the lake, right there in the background are Black Pine Peak and War Eagle Peak in the Black Pine Mountain Range. Now normally from this elevation, I've been in the past, there's usually water, or at least a mirage, there between the leftmost point and the actual peak of War Pine, or Black Pine Peak, which is the tallest one, and War Eagle Peak, which is the one slightly to the right. And then there's a gap, and then these two other points are visible. I'm just going to pan across further, and there's another tiny little point out there, and I'm not even sure what that is. And the camera doesn't think it's much of anything. But I'll go home and see if I can figure out what that is. It's probably roughly the same distance. And then panning across further, this is Promontory Point. And then panning a little further is Antelope Island and the town of Lake Point. Coming up here and doing this observation in the late afternoon and evening is usually the best because you get the most contrast with the mountain ranges. But the point of being out here is to show the difference in how much of Black Pine Peak is visible from this elevation compared to when I go down to a lower point down by the railroad near Lake Point, where most of that mountain range will disappear. And I'm going to put a cut in too, but I'll show the drive going down there. I'm going to set this to manual focus so it doesn't keep hunting in and out like that. So I'll be right back. Alright, so I fired up Google Earth here before I drive off down the road. I want to show where we're looking compared to my recording location. Black Pine and War Eagle Peaks are 110 miles away from where I film. And to get it to show properly, I'm going to use a 10-degree field of view in Google Earth, which is as narrow a field as it'll let you do, so it won't look quite as zoomed in as the camera view. Now when I record, I film from this location. My first location is right here by this microwave repeater tower. I park right about here on the side of this road. And then for my second location, I drive down this road, I make the sharp bend, cross these railroad tracks that you'll see, and then stop right here. And that's approximately 190 feet lower than the upper location at the tower. For the third location in this video, I drove down this road, took a right, and parked right here near this house. What I intended to do was to drive further down this road because it descends, and I thought maybe I'd be able to get far enough to see the mountain disappear completely, but there's houses all along here now, and that didn't work. So, going back up here to my first location, if I tilt the camera back, and I have to do this carefully because at 10 degrees field of view it does not behave how you normally think it will. There's Black Pine Peak and War Eagle Peak in the background. And since Google Earth does not account for refraction whatsoever, you have to set your eye altitude a little bit higher than you normally would in reality. And so this is approximately the view we had. A Black Pine, War Eagle, Black Pine Cone, and off to the right, which I found out later, was Monument Peak, which is 5,999 feet tall, and from my shooting location, according to the Metabunk curve calculator, 25 feet should have been visible. It's 82.5 miles away compared to the 110 miles that Black Pine and War Eagle are. Now I've downloaded all the USGS quadrangles, and what's interesting to do is to turn them on and overlay them on top of the mountain range, because viewed from the side like this, the contours are horizontal. So as the quadrangles draw in, I'll also turn them partially transparent so we can still see the mountain range behind. But the main thing to note is where the lettering cuts off from this view. We can see that 2 letters there and maybe part of a third visible. Let me turn the transparency on this down to about 50% so that you can still see the mountains in the background. Now to show how much of this range is cut off from my location, how much of it is below the horizon, I'm going to zoom in across here. Now the A that just came up right there, I know from looking at it earlier, was the 8,000 foot elevation contour. So as we pan across here, you can see how much of this mountain range is beyond the curvature of the Earth. There may be a couple of cuts put in here because it does not like drawing this many detailed images. But here's what we're seeing from my location, but we're only seeing down to this 8,200 foot contour. Now Black Pine Peak itself right here is 9,386 feet tall. So we're seeing 1,386 feet approximately. But the base of the mountain down here is only 5,000 feet. So from my vantage point, more than 3,000 feet of the mountain range is missing behind the curvature. It makes no difference how much or how little refraction there is on any given day. That will never be visible from my location. if we come down to roughly the altitude in my recording, that's about all we can see. That's the B, the L, and just a faint hint of the A in Black Pine Peak. So that much of that mountain range is missing. So I'll continue now and drive down the road, and we'll look at the second location, almost 200 feet lower. So my eye elevation here is 4,896 feet. So if we reduce that by 200 feet, let's see just how close that is to what we actually see. I think you'll be not surprised, I hope, to find out that it matches pretty much exactly. Okay, so I've got the manual focus set, and conveniently we got a train going by underneath there. Remember, this is a long way away. And that's also I-80 and Highway 36 running along under there. But if we zoom in here on Black Pine and War Eagle peaks, what I'm going to do is I'm going to overlay the USGS topographic quad on there from both its location and once I get down to the lower elevation, and we'll see just how much of that range vanishes below the horizon as I descend. Because like I say, I'm about 4,500 feet here, or 4,600, excuse me, and I descend down at the lower spot to 4,400 by the railroad tracks. Alright, on top we've got a still frame that I extracted from the video and enhanced the contrast so you can see it easier. And on the bottom I have the rendering saved out of Google Earth showing the contours overlaid as close as I can get to the same view underneath. And you'll note on the mountains, or on the rendering there, it only goes down to the just below the A in Black Pine Peak on that USGS quad. And the A, the lower part of the A, was the 8,000 foot contour, if you'll remember. So we are seeing at approximately the 8,000 foot level on that mountain range. Now I'll do another one here when we get down to the lower point, and we'll see the difference, how much disappears just descending 190 feet. So let's go down there and we'll see what we get. I'm going to keep this running while I drive so you don't think I'm trying to fool you. It's going to be cold, but that's the sacrifice I'm willing to make. That and driving on slick, muddy road, snow-covered roads. But that's what real research is, flat earthers. You gotta get out. I'd also like to note, draw your attention to that lingering contrail from that jet at the beginning of the screen, beginning of the recording. It's just lingering up there, but it's not like there's any other high, thin clouds indicative of moisture in the upper atmosphere preventing it from evaporating or dispersing. No, it must be them spraying us, because I felt the cancer creeping up last night. It was almost unbearable, but I do what I can. Well, dropped to 4,560 feet. Should I hit up Bob and Jaron and the Globe Busters for some money for some new shocks or struts? Now at 4,545 feet. 460. Sure there's no trains coming down these flat, straight, level tracks. And we'll swing around here. There's the GPS. We're at 4,410 feet now at those coordinates, and we're just outside of Lake Point here. So we've descended to 180, 190 feet, and there's those same features. That's Stansbury Island. Zooming in, Lambourne Rock, and the Raft Rivers. We've come a little bit east of where we were, so there's more of them visible. And then right here, look how much of Black Pine and War Eagle Peaks has disappeared. Now there's none of those features on the left visible. Just a few on the right. And again, I'm going to overlay the USGS topo quads on that, and we'll see where that exactly is. Alright, same thing again. We've got the still frame from the video on top and the Google Earth rendering below. And note this time that we can only see down to the letter B in Black Pine range on the quadrangle. And that sits at the 8,640 contour. So by descending just 190 feet, we've lost more than 600 feet of visibility on the mountain range. And notice also at the top of the mountains, there's some interesting refraction and possibly superior mirage effects going on, because that's not the shape of the peak seen from the higher elevation. But it's still nevertheless a pretty close representation of what's normally seen out there. And panning over here again, there's no sign of that little knoll or hump or whatever that was, and then you've got Promontory Point and Antelope Island. See if there's any boats out there today. Don't know what those things are in the water. Now normally this is where I cut it off. I don't try to find places to stop further down because I'm in the trees. But if I can find an even lower spot where I can see just the point of Black Pine, I'll come back. But for right now I'm going to pause it, and it may be the end. But when I get home I'll add the rest of the data from the USGS. Alright, so I did find one more place real quick here. At these coordinates. It's a little bit east again, but we've dropped another 50 feet. And now when we look out at Black Pine and War Eagle Peaks over here, there's Promontory, Stansbury Island, Lambourne Rock, all the others. From 50 more feet further down, now there's just a tiny little nub of Black Pine and War Eagle left. Just the very tops, perhaps the top 300 to 500 feet. And it turns out I was pretty close to right, actually. Now, Google Earth, when you try to render something this close to the ground, just sort of waves a white flag and gives up. You can see it's pretty corrupted looking. But the elevation, when you overlay the quadrangle and look, to get just those 3 pinnacles on the mountain and nothing else around it is approximately the 9,000 foot contour plus or minus 50. So by descending another 50 feet from the previous location at the railroad tracks, we've lost another more than 200 feet of visibility on the mountain range. So to finish up here, I'll put all 3 images next to each other from 4600, 4410 or so, and this one at 4360. And you can see how much of the mountain range is lost at each point. Alright, we're going to take it out with this image right here. This is a rendering from much further north, at the north end of Salt Lake, of the Black Pine Mountain Range in Google Earth on top, and the view of the mountains below from my various altitudes just at the south end of Lake Point. So there was the 4,600 foot, there's the 4414, and coming up here will be the last one at the third point, 4372. And you can see the red area, transparent on the Google Earth image, is what is never visible from my location. Nearly 3,000 feet, never visible. And from the lower elevation, 4,000 feet, becomes invisible. Beyond the horizon, beyond the curvature of the Earth, no perspective, no curvilinear perspective, no magical downwards refraction. It's a fact. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.